Welcome to the Cannabis Review. We're going to have a great show for you today. We're very lucky to have a very knowledgeable, important figure over in Denver. His name is Josh Hanfling. He's one of the co-founders of Sewald Hanfling, an agency in Colorado. So welcome to the show, Josh. How are you keeping?
Very good, thank you. Appreciate you having me on today.
Very much appreciate you coming on the show. I'm going to jump straight into things. It's been a good week in terms of cannabis over for the United States and some of the elections. Some of the states going really well. So I'm going to want to start with, what did Denver's success in legalizing cannabis? How can Europe learn from that? How are the things that went well? Because we can see some of the states have done it successfully, but Denver seems to be the one that leads the way when it comes to the United States.
Well, yes, certainly. I mean, Denver leads the way in large part because we had no choice. Colorado and Denver were truly the first city and state in the world, in my belief, to fully legalize cannabis. So we kind of had no choice. The state of Colorado and Denver did it very differently. Denver sort of, we had medical here for quite some time prior to legalizing recreational. And because of that, when rec came, we already had a lot of marijuana stores sort of near each other, close to each other, that were medical. Denver, a lot of cities limited where the stores could be, how many stores it could be. Some cities divided up by quadrants, said you could have 2 stores per quadrant. In Denver, I forget the numbers now, it's been a long time, but we have more cannabis stores than Starbucks in Denver. So there are quite a few of them. Now it's consolidating as time's gone on. It's been, about 8 years since we started this. But overall, as we say, the Great Colorado Experiment, as we like to call it, has gone very well. Over time, one of my jobs as a lobbyist is, when this all started, putting the structure, helped to create the structure around it. And now it's sort of peeling back the layers because, we didn't know what it looked like. 8 years ago, I mean, it's a lot easier to set up a cannabis structure now because you can learn from us. And we do a lot of seminars here with our government and others, have folks come out to figure out regulated, because we just didn't know what the hell it was going to be in the beginning.
Okay, so you guys kind of were the first ones into the water and made the mistakes, and everybody's going to be able to learn from your mistakes. And I think some of the politicians who watch this in Ireland, I think Ireland are on the doorstep of legalizing cannabis pretty soon. I think there's a big swell and a movement here in this country for it. So I hope a lot of the politicians who do watch the show go and check out Josh's website and some of the consultancy that they do with other governments. I'm going to jump into the next topic, which I think is something that a lot of people don't know too much about when it comes to it, but it's the importance of PR in the cannabis sector. How important is it for brands? And we know this is not something you just specialize in. You have multiple different facets to your organization, but how important is that for PR? Because there could be a good few companies in Ireland who are looking to get into this industry who just don't have the expertise when it comes to maybe consulting for a client or being able to advise a client on the right trajectory for their brand. What would you advise to the young business owners and the PR firms here?
Yeah, absolutely. They do go hand in hand. I mean, as you said, we're not a strict public relations firm. Public affairs, we're more, government. We do lobbying. We work with governments. But a huge part of what we do is the PR side of it, and not necessarily like press releases and talking to the media, all that. Elected officials and people, and even down to the city level, they don't want to hear just from me. They want to hear from outside folks as well. So having the correct press, the right media, the right spin, if you will, on everything is hugely important. There's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of misunderstanding of this. Everybody goes back to, dude, when I was in college, it was like this, and it's a different world now. And frankly, the opponents have a lot to work with. They can all go find one case of one person in one city that had one bad incident, and that just is not, relevant to the full industry. Look, every industry has problems. Every new industry has problems. The biggest problem is misinformation and having the other side, the opposition, control that information. Having the right PR is huge. We're very restricted here in Colorado on what we can do, what cannabis companies can do in terms of advertising, what they can do in terms of PR. I don't know what restrictions they may have on you, but if you're able to, advertise, I would not do big advertising everywhere. That's why, because you don't want big billboards that's advertising marijuana. That's not great for kids. It's not the right message, but the public relations side of it can fill that gap for you. Have them get involved in the nonprofit community where allowed. That's hugely helpful as well. But the PR absolutely will help to keep the true and the real facts in line.
Yeah, I think something you said there, one of the last guests we had on, Manu, who's one of the co-founders of Rua Biotech over in New Zealand, who they just recently had their vote there and narrowly looks like they've lost in terms of legalizing go for recreational. And he told me one of the things that happened was they were too factual about their information when it came to trying to market the whole legalization. They were just given facts, whereas the negative side had a religious group from America backing them, picked one or two cases that was ridiculously one-sided and just kind of bombarded the public with that one-sided message. So again, I think it's something that a European audience here can learn from, that there is a game to be played when in terms of getting your message out there, and it needs to be done correctly and appropriately and in the right methods.
Yeah, and they're great stories. I mean, they're direct stuff. I mean, medical marijuana and marijuana in general, we haven't done full studies on it. We're just starting to get actual studies here. That's a whole other topic of discussion. But we know, at least anecdotally, that it helps people. It helps veterans. It helps people with PTSD. It helps people managing pain. It's the stories. You're right. I mean, if a group that is opposed to marijuana finds one story of one kid that had one problem, they're going to use it all day long. And there are great stories to talk about them. But there are also great stories about, your economy. You've got a great economy there. You guys understand business very well. But we have some smaller towns in Denver where the jobs are real. The jobs and the community, the taxes have real impact on small towns. Our cannabis industry is, I think the last time we looked at, about a $3 billion economic impact for the state of Colorado. So, if you want, sometimes you want to get away from talking about the effects of marijuana because you're not going to win some of those arguments. But the economic side of it is huge, and it can really be helpful, especially in small towns, especially to people. There are a lot of folks, honestly, when I work through some of the grow facilities here, I look at these kids, I'm like, I don't know where the heck they're going to be working if they weren't working here. But they love what they do. They love the industry, and they've got good paying jobs with good benefits.
Yeah, well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It's the ability to create economic growth, which is probably going to tease the politicians the most. The jobs are there for the kind of people who've been in this industry and loving it so much. And the one other side I was going to tip on was the activism side. How much is there two sides in let's say Colorado when it started, that there was the fierce activists who were a little bit too hardcore and too trying to get their message down the throat about the wrong narrative? And did they assimilate then with the lobbyists like yourselves and everybody came into the one narrative and the one message? Or is it still the case whereas there's still somebody kind of screaming from a barnyard?
Yeah, excellent question. Of course, in the beginning of the activists, right? The activists, in a lot of cases, the ones who get these things done. I remember about 8 years ago when we finally passed recreational marijuana here, we had to, because of the way our taxes are set up in Colorado, we had to run a campaign to allow the taxes to be directed and spent the right way. And it was called, ironically enough, the AA campaign. But we had a lot of the activists in there, and they wanted to do, just bombard everybody and go crazy. And I finally said, guys, you don't have to try and screw the man now. You are the man. Yeah. I said, you won. Be over it and act mature. So yeah, in the beginning, there was a couple years, and they still pop up every now and then, the activists, and they certainly have, their needs here and there. But that's exactly how it started. And they finally realized that this is a real business. This is what we're going to do. And you won. Once you won and you're legal, there's no, activists have their role, but you got to go work with the mainstream. You got to go work in the right path to get the laws and the rules and everything done and create it the right way.
Yeah, I think that's one thing, the realization that this is going to be an industry like every single other industry in the world. It's not going to be rainbows and raindrops all every single day. There's going to need to be a corporate structure put in place to every single kind of company that is involved in this. And if you don't, you're just not going to succeed in it. I think that's the end of it.
Frankly, we want to embrace that. I mean, part of the argument to legalizing marijuana, of course, is to take it out of the criminal hands and to make it, to make it legal so that it's regulated correctly. And frankly, our clients, when we lobby on behalf of our clients, we support good regulation and we support good enforcement, right? We don't want over-regulation. We don't want over-enforcement, but we want to have it because that certainly and for the good players, which, hopefully everybody will be, but there definitely are not great players. It's for the good players. It's good for their business. And in long term, anything that's bad for the industry, it's bad for one company, it's bad for everybody. So you want everybody on a good level playing field. And the best way to do that is to have the real good enforcement and good regulation.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think something that you can kind of placate the activists with, and that every industry, I think, around the world should have, is that generating revenue from the taxes goes to local neighborhoods and to the area surrounding specific businesses that are doing really well, and this should be benefiting them. It shouldn't be just going into central state coffers. It should be distributed between a number of different worthy sources.
Yeah, and there's some direct things for taxes. Obviously, like a lot of the tax should go towards enforcement. That's we had a lag. The way the budgets work, right? We allowed for the money one year, and we didn't have the money until next year. So there's a lag until the law enforcement community could catch up. But they absolutely need more money. So there's some direct ones as well. We put the original bill here. I think $40 million a year went to helping schools. So that was sort of an indirect.
Right.
But the theory is that it's bad for kids, which I'll argue that as well, that it hasn't affected kids that much here. But yeah, that the money should be used for that. But, the other thing to be careful of, and it's happening here again in Denver this week, is everybody, when they want to fund something, they go after marijuana tax money. They go, let's just raise marijuana tax money, and we'll use that because they think somehow that, nobody will be against it. So when you put the structure in place, you don't want the tax too high. I know I'm off on a tangent here, but you don't want the tax too high because it drives people right back to the black market.
Yeah, no, I think, again, it's one of the things that having your Department of Revenue on side, giving them a full, concise kind of, this is how it should be taxed, this is where the revenue should go, having your police department on side, knowing that they're going to be funded from the direct sale of a product that they can take off the streets and not send money into the hands of criminals, and then convincing the politicians that, look, you can make a lot of money from this, and the whole point of being a politician is to make money and to run a country efficiently.
Yep, absolutely.
The last topic before I let you go, I think, is going to be something that you're going to specialize in. It's the politics of cannabis and affecting change, pretty much lobbying to a degree. What are the to-dos and what are the do-nots when it comes to anybody in specific, let's say one of the territories in Europe here that are looking to legalize and trying to affect change in their territories?
Well, I mean, it comes down to, anything in good lobbying, right? And don't overemphasize things. Keep it to the facts. Don't get into too much hyperbole, which people like to do. You touched on, activists a little while ago, back in the beginning. Cannabis is going to change the world. It's going to fix every problem. Everybody's going to be happy and great and healthy. All right, that's not reality. The good news is, when we were starting to lobby for cannabis in Denver and Colorado 8 years ago, we were kind of winging it. We didn't know what this was going to look like. We didn't know really what it was going to be. We had to use our best guess. The good news is, for anybody getting in the space now, you've got 8+ years of our goods, our bads, our mistakes that you can look at. You can look at our legislation. You can look at what worked. You can look at what hasn't. You have stuff you can point to. We've got a lot of legislators here. I'd be more than happy, I'm sure, to talk to folks. I obviously am available to talk to people. We've got some regulators here. I know like talking to people as well. So you got a lot of experience to draw on here. And don't overextend. I mean, this is, and by the way, it's also, starting these businesses are incredibly hard. The guys that started them 8, 9, 10 years ago had no idea really what they were doing to grow marijuana legally to scale. You have that expertise now as well. So leverage the people that have been doing it and know how to do it, and really just leverage that to go forward.
Yeah, no, I think that's some sage advice for anybody who's watching there. For anybody who wants to know anything more about the company that they represent, it's Sewald Hanfling. You can see Josh's company there, so go visit it. I highly recommend it. The top people when it comes to Colorado. So I can't thank you enough for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. Hopefully we can get you on maybe in the next year's time and things have progressed over here in Ireland, and we'll have some good news, and maybe some partnerships can happen in between the two states and countries.
Great. Absolutely. All the best. Thanks for having me.
Cheers, mate. Cheers, everybody. Until the next show.